Hello, welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. If you're listening for the first time, welcome. This is Stageworthy. It is a podcast about Canadian theater and the people who make it. Every week, I talk to a theater maker from somewhere in Canada, and I talk to them about theater, about their theater journey, about who they are. And most of the times, sometimes I talk to people whose names you might know, but a lot of times I talk to people who I think you should know, people who haven't broken big, who aren't household names, but honestly, people that you should know. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you like this episode, leave a comment and tell me what you liked about this episode, and subscribe so that every time I release an episode, you get a notification that a new episode is available. If you're listening to the audio only version, you should make sure you're subscribed by opening your favorite podcast app, searching for Stageworthy, and hit the follow button, the subscribe button, the heart button, the plus button, whatever it might be in your podcast app. And that way, whenever I release an episode, it will get downloaded directly to your device. You don't even have to go looking for it. You don't have to wait to get a notification that there's a new episode. It will download directly to your device. In a minute, I'm going to get to talking about today's guest, who is Aisling Murphy, the Globe and Mail's theater critic. But first, I want to talk about Patreon, because I can't do this podcast without the patrons who've chosen to back me on Patreon. I give this podcast to you as a listener for free. I don't have advertising. I don't charge for the episode. In doing that, I'm covering all the costs of putting this out there myself. I pay for the editing software. I pay for the hosting. Everything about this podcast is a one-person show. And that means that in the almost 8 years now that I've been doing this podcast, I have been the sole person putting money into this podcast. And I need help to make this podcast, and I need help to make it grow. Right now, we're just covering the cost of producing the podcast. And I've had to eliminate having a transcript for the show because the tools that I was using are too unreliable and require so much work to fix the audio that it's just too much when I'm not getting paid for the time for any of this. So there are tools that I could use that would give me a more accurate transcript, but those are paid tools, and I can't just add another paid tool unless I have the backing to do it. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you want to help to make it, become a patron, because patrons get early access to every episode of Stageworthy. And whenever there are issues that I want to discuss, I go to the patrons first. There's a few that I'm still talking about, trying to figure out how I'm going to do them, but it's the patrons who I'm going to talk about those things with. And they're basically the brain trust. So if you want to take part in making this podcast, become a patron. It just costs $7 Canadian a month. And you'll be helping me to make this podcast. And as the Patreon grows, the more patrons we get, the more I can offer to the patrons. So back the podcast, help me make this show, and I will be forever grateful. Now on to today's guest. Aisling Murphy is the theater reporter for the Globe and Mail, a native of Baltimore, Maryland, who is a transplant to Canada. She's been the senior editor of Intermission magazine and has written as a staff writer for the Toronto Star, has done freelance culture writing for the New York Times, CBC Arts, all over the place. And when longtime Globe and Mail theater reporter Kelly Nestruck said that he was stepping down, I think we all wondered who was going to fill those shoes. He'd been the theater reporter at the Globe for so long, and Aisling is such an insightful reviewer. And although Kelly has left some big shoes to fill, Aisling is the one who can fill them. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. And now here is my conversation with the Globe and Mail's theater reporter, Aisling Murphy. Aisling Murphy, thank you so much for joining me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I wanted to talk to you for a while. Probably, I think, since you started reviewing for Intermission, but now you are the theater reporter for the Globe and Mail, Canada's newspaper. And one of the things that I'm very curious about is how someone from Baltimore, Maryland, finds their way to goes to theater school, finds their way to Toronto, eventually starts reviewing, and then finds their way to the Globe and Mail. What is that story? How did you get from there to here?
So this is a whole thing. I was very much a musical theater kid. I feel like I've been kind of reconnecting with that as an adult as well. But anyway, I was super into musical theater, and in high school, I really wanted to become fluent in French. And so the University of Ottawa had a program for international students where if you took, I think it was if you took 60% of your courses in French, like bilingually, you could pay the provincial tuition, which was so much cheaper than any options I had in Maryland. I didn't really like Maryland all that much, so I was like, great, let's move to Canada. That sounds good. Um, and that was in 2016. So obviously this was before Trump was elected. So like I didn't necessarily move to Canada because of that, but the timing very much worked out, I would say. Yeah, moved to Ottawa, realized there wasn't as much of a musical theater scene there as maybe I had hoped. So I was, taking voice lessons and doing Kiwanis Festival and trying as hard as I could to sort of figure out what the musical theater niche could be for me. And then 2019 happened, and it was a whole situation where I had a really bad week, basically. I had some like significant dental surgery, and there was a breakup that happened, and my grandfather died, and all of those three things happened within like a week of each other. And I was like, okay, maybe my mental health is not awesome right now. And as a result of that, maybe I'm just going to pivot my entire life plan. And one of my professors, Yana Mirzan at the University of Ottawa, was like, hey, you don't have teeth. So maybe acting could like go on a break for a while. And I was like, yes, absolutely. But then also she, very fortunately said, hey, you should try out theater criticism. I think you're a good writer, and maybe this is something you'd like to do. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to see musicals for free. Um, and that turned into a whole career kind of by accident. So I started reviewing in Ottawa for a website called Capital Critic Circle, which I think kind of still exists. I hope they do. It was a little touch and go during the pandemic, but I wrote for Capital Critic Circle for a while. Pandemic, don't know if it reached Toronto, but like again, whole thing. That again sort of left me in a place of like, oh shit, now what do I do? Um, and then I don't know, it just sort of kept snowballing in that way where stuff just kept on happening, and then I'd, turn around and be like, "Oh, my life is different now." So that sort of looked like intermission reaching out to me. It was a Twitter DM, literally just a, "Hey, do you want to work for intermission for not that much money a month?" Doing just basic editing. And I was like, absolutely, yes, that sounds great. And I did that remotely for a little while. Wound up moving to Toronto for grad school technically, but also that was mostly for intermission in my head. I was like, no, I need to be where the theater is. And of course, at the time there was no theater, so that was very aspirational. But and yeah, I got incredibly lucky to be asked to do a freelance story for the Toronto Star. And the rest is kind of history. I don't want to bore people with everything, but yeah, it's retrospectively, it's a pretty straight line from like really liking musical theater to finding the playwright Sarah Kane as well was a big part of it. But then also, after my first couple freelance stories for the Toronto Star, I just got really lucky in being in the right place at the right time and getting to do lots of like internships and sort of entry level reporter jobs. And it all just kind of spiraled from there.
I'm curious about how you felt reviewing your first show. For me, as somebody who somebody who still makes theater and has this podcast, I've avoided reviewing. I did it one year many years ago for Fringe, and I never did it again because I just felt, as somebody who made theater, that it was the wrong thing for me to be doing. Did you ever, as somebody who came from, like, you were a theater kid and now here you are giving your criticism about a show, did you feel awkward? Did you feel weird about doing that?
Yeah, this comes up about once a week. Yes, absolutely. I love my job so much, and I also feel like I come at it from a fairly unique perspective, just given, I went to theater school. I have acting training and directing training and playwriting training and all these things. So I try and come at work from the perspective of knowing that this industry is really, really hard and making things is really hard. But yeah, it's often super awkward and you're always kind of balancing like, hey, have I been for like too many drinks with that person to be able to be impartial for this show or whatever. I remember my first show, absolutely there was an acquaintance of mine in it and the show was really bad. And I remember being like, oh my God, is this what theater criticism is? Like trying to balance this forever? And the answer is sort of yes, but it does get easier, I have found.
That's an interesting question because I remember years ago I wondered how I would see John Kaplan around, the late great John Kaplan. I would see him around all the time. He was out for drinks with actors, like hanging out with people all the time, and I wondered how he could and how he balanced his social life as being social with actors, with like potentially giving them a bad review. And then I juxtapose that with like Glenn Sumi, who just doesn't get social with actors. He's like in, sees the show, gets out, doesn't do any of the other stuff. I can imagine that when you do know somebody in the show, it's a little awkward to how do you find that balance if you have to give like a critique?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the past, I'd say like past year, past 2 years, I've also, I've felt my social circles maybe shift, not because of this, but you do reach a certain point with theater criticism where if all of your friends are people who make theater, there will be hurt feelings and there will be sort of awkward conversations. So I've sort of found that it's maybe best for me to, I love the folks I went to theater school with and grad school with and all these things, but you know, it's a tricky balance, and I think my biggest MO when reviewing is kind of always don't be an asshole, even if you have to give a negative review or critique. I find that there's a way to couch it in a way that's productive rather than just tearing people down, regardless of if you're friends with them. I think that's just good criticism.
Yeah, I can remember years ago encountering somebody who, if you're, I don't know if you remember, you probably don't remember iMagazine. That was like for a while
Mm.
the media sponsor for Fringe, and they would bring on people from all everywhere, like every people who'd never reviewed before. They would like throw them out into the lines, and occasionally you would encounter somebody who was like, "I love giving bad reviews. It's my favorite thing to do," and you'd be like, "I don't want you anywhere near a show that I'm doing."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I sometimes a pan I think is warranted. I find I don't give too many pans. I don't think that they're deserved as much as maybe some markets might think that they are, but like I don't know. I find maybe one or two a year where it's like, okay, here's a place where this show had all the money in the world and it was still bad. Like sometimes I think there can be room for that sort of like, maybe there's a pun or something in there. But for the most part, no, I hate giving negative reviews. It's not yeah, I don't I go to theater wanting it to be good. I try and think of myself as just another audience member in that way where it's like, no, I also want it to be good. I don't relish saying like, hey, I couldn't hear you or hey, the pacing was bad. I yeah, I like theater and I would like to keep enjoying it.
Yeah, I can imagine like if you wanted the show to be bad, why would you even bother? Like, don't even go.
That this is the thing, right? But different people approach it in different ways. So yeah, that's just my approach, I would say.
I'm curious about because as somebody who came from, the US, from Maryland,
Mm.
when you're looking at Canadian theater, which is a very different animal in many different respects from the theater in the US. Um, and I don't again, I know that you loved musical theater as a younger person, and it was your what you were going for, what you wanted to do. Is there anything that you notice in particular about the difference between the theater that's produced in Canada and the theater that's produced in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just landscape wise, there is much more public funding in Canada. I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And that said, I don't think there's enough public funding for theater in Canada. But the result of that is I do find that broadly speaking, Canadian theater tends to pretty directly reflect Canada more often than not, which is really cool when that happens. And I think that that's a pretty direct way to engage an audience in ways that we don't necessarily see as much in the US, or maybe I didn't see as much when I lived in the US and when I've gone back as an adult. And the other thing as well is I, again, love a musical. And I find that Canada as a landscape, as a ecology, there's maybe less room for really strong productions of existing musicals that already are in the canon. So I find, and this is true for not musicals as well, but you find that there's lots of world premieres, lots of workshops, lots of really interesting stuff happening. But once a show has opened and maybe gotten a few good reviews and people seem to like it, it doesn't necessarily have a life after that first production. So I would love to see more Canadian regional theaters doing like Beautiful Scars and some of these amazing new musicals that have come out in the past couple of years. But either theaters are maybe a little concerned about if there's audience interest, if they can make money on shows, and that's fair. But I sometimes wonder what else is in that sort of vacuum of shows that had their world premiere and then never got done again that maybe we could still mine for season planning.
I think that's one of the greatest, for one of a better word, tragedies of Canadian theater is that there's so many great shows that get one production and then we never hear from them again. Now there are some that are that go buck against that. Kim's Convenience, for example, not only ran for ages at Soul Pepper, had other productions as well, but it's so rare to see a show that has a life after its initial production. And again, it's one of the things that I want to be asking. There's an episode I want to do, which is like that, where we talk to people about that, because I think that it's the thing that stands in the way of Canadian theater and its future. Like, we need to be able to have those productions.
Yeah, I think I am inclined to agree. And shows like Kim's Convenience and Come From Away, it's amazing that these shows have, come to be so well known on the global stage. But I do also sometimes wonder if maybe those shows in particular have almost pigeonholed Canadian theater for a global audience in a way where it's like, oh, if investors and producers outside of Canada only know about those two shows, there's so much more that Canadian artists, writers, composers, directors can do beyond that. And I'm interested in seeing more of that get picked up, either down south or in the UK or Ireland or Australia or all these other markets that I think really could support more Canadian work if more people knew about it.
Yeah. Years ago, Howard Sherman, who was at the time the head of the American Theater Wing, had a whole article called What's Wrong with Canadian Plays, and how there was a pipeline for shows that were from the UK to be produced in the US, that there were shows from the US and the UK being produced in Canada, but it didn't go the other way. And so he was like asking the question, why? Like, there was ever a great answer for that. And it's still the same now. Even considering that, like, we're in this post-pandemic world where everybody says that the audiences aren't coming back and the theaters are not doing as well. Not the non-commercial theaters, I think, is where that complaint largely sits. Now, as somebody who's been seeing a lot of theater, I mean, of course, reviewers sometimes I think maybe have a skewed vision because you're going on like opening night where they have largely papered the house, so it seems full. But and that sort of like inflates what you might see. But do you have this sense that outside of the commercial theaters that the audiences have not quite come back?
It's interesting. I'm always surprised by what audiences sort of flock to in numbers that weren't necessarily my picks or my favorites. I mean, one that comes to mind, and I have changed my tune on this show a little bit because I did go back to see it again. But I remember Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 when it first opened at Crows. Of course, it was this amazing co-production between Crows and Musical Stage. Beautiful, wonderful. At the time, I did not love it. I thought that the direction was a little chaotic. There was a lot of like running in circles when I wanted, some of the performers just to stand still. Oh my God. And I remember leaving being like, yeah, it's pretty good. Like I'm excited to see that we have these, heavy hitter regional theaters doing work like this, but I don't necessarily know if this translates to, commercial success or if audiences will love this. This feels like very chaotic to my eye. And then, of course, I was aggressively wrong. And I always kind of laugh when that happens. It's because you never know, right? Like, in a lot of ways, I find that criticism can be such a crapshoot. Like that's my thoughts won't always translate to the greater audience. And that was very much the case with that show, which, as we all know, extended, I want to say like 10 million times um, over the course of last year, and of course is now heading to Mirvish. I'm excited to see it again. I'm excited to see how yeah, Chris Abraham might tighten it and also expand it for this different space and all these things. But no, I remember every time I would see that show expand, I'd be like, what do you mean? I don't understand how this has broken the like uh theater bubble and that just random people on the street know about this. This is the one. But then I saw it again. I was like, oh no, I was wrong the first time. And also it got better over the course of its run. But
I was about to ask if you'd gone back to have that your opinion revised. It is. I mean, it is. At the end of the day, it's important for everybody to remember that a review is one person's educated opinion, and so um, it, their tastes might not be your tastes, which is
totally.
just a fact of the way that reviewing works. But it is interesting, I think, and I think maybe one of the things that you might have been seeing is the lack of workshopping. Because in Canada we don't workshop in the same way that they do, say, in New York. They'll workshop something for years and or for many weeks, right? Like, I remember I was working as an usher at the Ed Mervish Theater when they were doing about to open Aladdin, and that thing was in
Mm.
previews for like a month and a half to 2 years, a month and a half to 2 months of like every day doing the new show, making changes and fascinating to see from the house when they made changes. But that show was a workshop for a long time. Um, and sometimes I think we rush the workshop process. And that's again, as we're talking about opinions, that's my opinion. Because I'm sure that when you went back to come to Natasha Pierre, it had tightened in a way that it hadn't been when you first saw it.
100%. I think I was aware at the time as well that they had maybe had not a great tech period. Like I recall rumors of COVID or something had gone through the cast. So that might have been part of it too. But I mean, it's also I think the best part of my job is often when I get to see shows not on opening night. I really, for exactly the reasons you pointed out, I don't love opening nights. I find that they are often not super reflective of the show that later audiences, which most of the audience will be, that's not necessarily what they'll see, right? So anytime I've been able to go later in a run and actually review later in a run as well, that's my favorite thing.
I think that is actually the more honest review, because that first audience on opening night is the free tickets audience, the papered audience, the friends and family audience, that might be more enthusiastic and might react to things in a way that the regular audience might not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I never I never want to be overly grumpy on an opening night if everyone around me is like cheering, hooting, hollering, all the things for a show. Often I will feel the same way. Like I remember seeing Something Rotten at Stratford on opening night last year and being like, yeah, two standing ovations, I will join them. Happily so. This deserves them. But yeah, no, it's sometimes I find if I'm able to go later in a run and maybe there's still that reaction, that's something I can kind of note and be like, hey, this that level of energy has sustained through the run. Or I think more often it's a case of, okay, so here's how a room full of not industry friends, pals, whatever, react to a piece. And that's interesting in its own right.
Yeah. Now, at the Globe and Mail, in the shoes of Kelly Nestruck, who for a while was one of the only theater critics, theater writers at a publication in Canada. Um, there for and in Toronto, for example, the Toronto Star didn't have a full time writer. You mentioned being a freelance writer for them, but they didn't have a full time person covering theater, and most of the newspapers in a lot of the newspapers in Toronto didn't for a long time. But now the Star does have a full time theater writer that you've taken over from Kelly and become the theater reporter for the Globe and Mail. Um, is there does is there a responsibility to write about Canadian theater that sort of weighs on the shoulders of being the theater reporter at um and being responsible for writing about theater across Canada rather than just Toronto? Is there a particular responsibility that sits on you as that reporter?
Absolutely. I am aware that because I've been on the job. Oh my gosh, it's 6 months today. I've been at the job for 6 months as of today. Um, and that it's been maybe more of an adjustment than I had anticipated, but I've also been aware that my coverage has certainly skewed Toronto and Ontario centric. That's something that as I'm in the role longer, I really want to cover more all over Canada. I think that that's deeply important to what the job is and what I was hired to do. And yeah, it's something that I'm, trying my best to do more and more of as time goes on.
I mean, it is the thing that unlike being a movie reviewer, to be a theater reviewer, you have to travel to see the theater in the place that you're going to. There's no way to do that remotely. So that again, travel being expensive and all that sort of thing. But it must the thought of seeing theater in different places across Canada is very exciting to me to be able to experience the way that theater differs in each province. Is that something? I mean, you mentioned you haven't really been able to do that yet, or it's skewed more Toronto, Ontario. But is that something you're particularly looking forward to?
100% yes. Because I mean, even in these 6 months, I had been able to cover a few productions and key players in other markets while I was at intermission. So this came in handy even last week. I Forgiveness opened at the Stratford Festival, and that's directed by Stafford Arima, who is the artistic director of Theatre Calgary. I have got to see his production of A Christmas Carol a couple years ago. Not even kidding, it's one of the best things I've seen in Canada. I love that production. They do it every year. If you're anywhere near Calgary, go see it. It's awesome. But knowing that and having been to Calgary and been able to engage with that community and that theater and that particular artist only made it easier for me to do my job here. So I am so looking forward to being able to see more outside of where I live.
I really I'm making a point of trying to talk to people who are not Toronto artists because I think that Toronto takes up a lot of air in the Canadian theater landscape. I mean, we're the biggest city in Canada, but I do think there's a lot of air that's taken up by Toronto that other cities deserve to have their theater scenes as highlighted as any other. And of course, there are exciting things that are happening there. I still remember that years ago, Kat Sandler had a show that was designed for a theater in Edmonton. There was actually two plays that happened at the same time, and I have been dying to see this play, but of course, it only ever happened at that theater in Edmonton. There's so much that's going on that if we just concentrate on one place, we're missing out on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Canada is so vast and diverse, not only with the people, but even geographically. And I find that has a huge impact on the theater that these people are able to make. Every time I've been able to get out of Toronto to go see stuff elsewhere, it's just been, I feel like I've learned so much and it's been so rewarding for future work. I mean, getting to go to FTA in Montreal was huge because I think two or three of those shows wound up being programmed in Toronto in the following season. So it's like, oh, not only have I already had the chance to see this, but I can actually speak pretty intelligently about things like season curation and stuff like that. So, no, absolutely. I have a few things in the works that I don't think I can talk about yet, but I'm very excited to get out of Toronto.
Awesome. Awesome.
Or to see shows outside of Toronto.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Nobody's gonna cancel you for that.
Incredible.
We were talking a moment ago about responsibility. And one of the things that I've often wondered about being a theater reviewer is if there is, as the reviewer, a perceived responsibility to be a booster, to not to lift up a show that in another market might not be lifted up quite as much. Or if and not particularly, I'm not saying that you've done this, but in general in theater reviewing, like does the responsibility of to Canadian theater outweigh the responsibility to the artist, if that makes any sense, or sorry, to the audience, if that makes any sense?
It's a tricky question, and my thoughts on this have certainly changed in the past few months as well. Just given that I did come up sort of through theater school and maybe like, a step into the industry as well. I feel like when I started reviewing for intermission, I was more on the side of being a cheerleader than on the side of being more of a kind of robust critic, I would suppose. It's not to say that the work itself wasn't robust, but I was trying pretty hard to find as much as I could to celebrate in a piece of work. Nowadays, I mean, the Globe has a really, again, just diverse audience, and I think that our readership deserves to get as honest a truth as I am able to provide to them. So, I think some shows certainly need that championing and that cheerleading, and when it's deserved, I really love to do it. I mean, getting to review Monks for the Globe and Mail, which this tiny indie show that it's stupid and wonderful and just maybe one of the best things I've ever seen. That was the sort of thing where it's like, okay, maybe normally this wouldn't be the sort of show that the Globe would review, but I think for me and my like evil scheming, I'm just like, wait, maybe if I can review it, maybe this will get programmed more places, which I would really like to happen. So, sometimes I think that sort of championing is appropriate and warranted. Other times maybe it's not. I really try and take things like company resources, and things like that just into account where it's like, okay, if you're a company that has all of the money in the world, and the thing you make maybe isn't that great, I don't necessarily feel a huge responsibility to champion that just because it's Canadian, you know? So it depends, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember years ago, I was doing a show at the Hamilton Fringe, and at the time, I mean, again, a lot of the reviewing that gets done at places like the Hamilton Fringe, it's 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 people seeing shows for free. It's like, that's why they're doing it. But I found that in a lot of cases, the reviewing was overly enthusiastic for some of the shows. Like there were shows that essentially got called, like every show got a great review, which is not possible, right? And not every show is great. And I often saw people leaving a show feeling like they missed out on something. Like, oh, I read that this was this was this good and it was okay, but it kind of does the audience a disservice to like tell them this is the greatest show in the world, and they go and see it and they leave thinking, I guess I just don't understand theater.
This is the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, I want more people to see more theater. And I don't think that saying a show is better than it is the way to do that. So I've definitely, I feel a great sense of responsibility to the Globe and Mail readership, and I don't want to lead them astray. A lot of our readers will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I don't think at all in this job I've approached the show being like, how do I make this sound better than it is so that they sell more tickets? That's not something I'm interested in.
No, and as the reviewer, it's not your responsibility to sell their tickets for it.
No. No, it's not.
As somebody who's, you've spent a little while seeing quite a bit of theater, I don't want you to pick favorites as far as shows, because
Mhm.
that would be impossible for me to it's sort of like all the things I've seen. What's your favorite? Almost impossible. Um, but are there things about the Canadian theater scene or the Canadian theater world that you've seen that you particularly enjoy? What is it about Canadian theater that you have loved?
Oh, oh, this is such a good question. I mean, I don't know. I do appreciate maybe not individual productions, but when theater companies are able to constantly reinvent how they're doing their work while also maintaining a really consistent artistic vision. I mean, coal mine, again, full disclosure, I worked at coal mine for about 6 months last year. I obviously don't anymore. But I mean, coal mine, ever since I moved to Toronto, I have been so impressed by how not only they've been able to revamp their space, but the actual plays that they choose, and the ways that they choose to stage them. I've always found really inventive and often on a shoestring budget. And some of them have worked better than others. I would be the first to admit that. But you again, it's that sense of play never falling away from the work that they're doing. I think Crows, for the most part, is like that too. Again, some shows have not been great. I don't think that's a particularly surprising take. But I think Crows has been pretty consistent in both presenting new work, interesting interpretations of old work, things like that. So for me, it's less about individual productions, but actually being able to discover how different companies do things. And then, if an artist maybe worked for that company, but then goes to do something somewhere else, seeing how those artistic sensibilities maybe combine and meld in interesting ways. It's very fun.
Now, as the wheel of the year turns and the seasons change, the theater seasons specifically change. It must there are times of year when it is particularly busy, and here we are recording this in the summer as two of the biggest festivals in Canada basically have their rolling premieres of like, each show having its opening night and its premiere and opening so that now that show's going to play, but there's more shows to come for each festival in addition to any other theater that's happening in the city. How do you balance all of those big shows that you're having to go see and still be able to sort of like get the thing written and like enjoy, because I'm sure the schedule is pretty packed.
I mean, it is. I mean, I'm so incredibly lucky now in that that is my job. So for the most part, like the hours spent at the theater, that's part of my 35-hour work week, which is lovely. Because I worked as a breaking news reporter at a TV station for about a year, not even 9 months. And that would be a case of I would wake up in the morning. I would usually have a 6 a.m. shift. So I do breaking news from 6 to 3 in the afternoon. I would maybe get to sleep, maybe. And then I would go to the theater and hopefully write a review that night as well. Or, sometime the next day on my lunch break or something. That was not sustainable. And I'm really glad I don't have to do that anymore. So the fact that getting to all these shows and writing about them and having that writing, editing, editor time the next day it's a huge luxury that I don't take for granted. It's wonderful.
As you're sort of seeing these shows, does how are there particular shows that as the seasons are announced, are there ones that you sort of think I can't wait to review that, and ones that you're sort of like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to review that." Does that happen at all, or are you able to like balance the excitement?
Yeah, I mean, I love season announcement season because it also, as I think most of my colleagues would agree, most of the critics and theater reporters tend to get them early, so I always feel like I have a bit of a secret, which is just kind of me being goofy. But yeah, I don't like jukebox musicals. So next year's Mirvish season is maybe not super to my taste. It's not that I'm dreading it. It's just it's not. There are other things in the Mirvish season next year. I'm stoked to see Telltale Harbor. I am stoked to see Kimberly Akimbo. Those are more to my taste, and I am super excited to review those. But in terms of some of the regional companies, it's one of the nice things is that when these companies are doing so many world premieres and things, I have no idea what they're about or how they'll be. So it really is I'm as sort of blind to that as any audience member would be, which actually makes it easier to do my job because I'm not going in with as many sort of preconceived like, ugh, another jukebox musical or ugh, another solo show about growing up in Oakville. Like it's a lot easier to sort of temper that when I don't know what I'm seeing.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine. I mean, listen, as an actor, I've performed in the Scottish play far too many times, and I don't relish seeing it. It's like at a certain point, there are plays that I personally are like, I know why you're doing it. I'm tired. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm not sick of Shakespeare yet. I will maybe get there in a couple of years. For now, I don't, for now it's fine. It's not necessarily something I look forward to when it comes up, but like it's fine. It's okay.
I mean, I listen, I know that there are shows that they kind of have to do because they bring in the student shows, which help, sort of like the matinees get sold out. They have to do certain ones. But I'm always excited when I see like a show that almost never gets performed because those are the ones that are kind of like, oh, I don't remember how this ends. Excellent. It's fun.
No, absolutely. And like yeah, getting to see things that I read in theater school is always really fun. And I mean, this is maybe a little bit of a digression, but Get That Hope at Stratford last year. I had never seen a production of Long Day's Journey into Night, which that play, to be clear, is not. I think even calling it an adaptation is maybe not quite it, but it's about this family in Little Jamaica on a very hot day in the middle of summer. All of these family members have different struggles and things that they need to work through. And I would say it is very much in the spirit of Long Day's Journey into Night, which was one of my favorite plays in theater school. So getting to see that where I didn't necessarily know that much about the show before I went, and I got there and I'm like, what in the O'Neill? This is Long Day's Journey into Night. This is so cool. I love unexpected canonical programming. So not necessarily a new work, but not Romeo and Juliet. Like something kind of neatly in the middle always gets me intrigued at the very least.
Absolutely, absolutely. I definitely feel that. I definitely feel that. And it is exciting to see shows because again, there are plenty of shows that you read when you're in theater school that you almost never get to see. Or
Mm.
and again, we're talking about if we're talking about Canadian plays, plays that maybe you picked up a copy of and you would love to see it, and you never will because it will all probably it may never get another production. But there are plays that I read when I was in theater school or after that I still think about and I would love to see a production of them. And that probably will never happen. So they can only exist in my mind.
Totally. I mean, I'm sort of aware of the kind of privilege I have about this as well. But I mean, I didn't go to theater school that long ago, and so like when I was in theater school, we were reading a lot of Hannah Moscovich and Jordan Tannehill and these very contemporary, like still working Canadian playwrights. So I've had the opportunity a couple times to be like, oh, I not only did I read this in theater school, but I'm friends with this person on Facebook and can talk to them about their work as part of my job. Which yeah, is still just surreal, honestly, and very cool when it happens.
Oh, I mean, speaking of how that could be surreal, can you think again? You don't have to use names if you can't, but is there a moment where that surreality came was like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening? Is there one that you can think of in particular?
Yes, actually. I worked as an embedded critic on a new play last year. Yes, last year. The play was called The Exhale by Lisa Elves. It's a sapphic, polyamorous, beautiful mess of a play. I really love that script and getting to be an embedded critic on it, which basically meant that I was not only there to review, but I was in the room watching the process and sort of putting the process in dialogue with the final product. It was super cool. I think more new plays should do that. It was a lot of fun. But Mev Beatty was in that production in that reading. So get not only getting to watch Mev rehearse a role and prepare for this reading, but actually watching her build it from the ground up because she was the first person to do this role was very, very special. I've been a huge fan of Mev's forever, and so getting to actually not only see her on stage but uh, work through the tangling and untangling of what it actually means to build a new role in real time with the playwright in the room was wild and one of my favorite experiences ever, maybe.
Now, as an embedded playwright, or sorry, as an embedded reviewer, how do you get to express that to your audience? How do you get to take that information and give that to your audience, or does that have to wait for the review? Like, how does this embedded reviewer work?
Yeah, I mean, it's super cool. Without getting too into the weeds about it, I will say there's a piece about this at intermissionmagazine.ca if people are interested. But Canadian theater often either doesn't have money for or maybe doesn't feel it has need for production dramaturgs. So embedded criticism is sort of somewhere between traditional theater criticism and production dramaturgy. So it's very process centered. And so the final review isn't necessarily like a review that you would find in the Toronto Star or Globe and Mail, but I find that it can be something a little richer because it's actually putting the process and the discussions in the rehearsal room and sort of the loose ends in dialogue with the thing that the audience actually sees, which I think again for a theater ecology that gets a fair amount of public funding, that's the sort of thing that's really handy in a grant application or just the archival of Canadian theater as well, which I don't think there's enough of. So it's very cool, and I hope more publications do it soon.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things I remember years ago, I was in New York and I was at the library. I think it was the library of the Lincoln Center, which is the performing arts library, and I realized that you could see the archival video of any show from like back in the 70s and like
Mhm.
experience the show. Like not like be in the room because you can't do that anymore, but to like see the original cast perform the show. And we don't really have that in Canada. We don't have the opportunity to do that very often. So any archival information is kind of is gold for people who are looking back on theater.
Yeah, absolutely. And like not to get on too much of a soapbox, but I think at its best, theater criticism sort of is that means of archival, right? Like I remember when I first moved to Toronto, I was curious if anyone had ever done the show Songs for a New World by Jason Robert Brown. It is unsurprisingly a musical. I love that show. It's one of my favorite scores of all time. And I was curious if anyone had done it in Toronto, and the only thing I could find that proved that anyone had done it was a review that talked maybe a little more about the men's paper towel dispenser than the show itself. And I remember just being so irritated because I'm like, I don't really care if it was good or not. That's not why I'm reading this. I'm actually just curious, how did they do it? What was the directorial vision, if any? So I think, that level of snark sometimes has its place, but as someone who at the time was a theater student and who was interested in theater history, I was like, oh, this isn't helpful for that.
As somebody who may have been around when that publication was printing these reviews, I probably know what publication that was. Uh, it was the biggest complaint back in the day when that publication was in existence, that the reviews would concentrate on things that were not germane to the production. In some cases, it was iMagazine back in the day when they first started up. Every review would start with all the things they didn't like that got them to the theater and why they were in a bad mood when they sat down or whatever. Very little about, not enough about the actual show.
Yeah, again, like I think that there can be a place for that, right? It's just being able to couch it with who does this serve? And if the answer isn't either your audience or maybe much lower on the list, the artist, I don't think it's worth saying. Like I think the occasional laugh is okay, but only putting out snark isn't helpful to anyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and like you say, in many cases, especially in Canada, the review is the record. The stills that are published, production stills that might go along with an article, that's the record of what that show looked like. And there are shows that, like, again, I've only seen pictures of, I've only heard about, and it's because of the reviews that I know anything about those productions, and that's super valuable, and yet also sad in the way that we don't have a visual record aside from that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I am a big fan of programs like Stratfest at Home, which does have that very professional quality archival recordings of different plays. I wish there were more of those. I am a self-proclaimed stan of The Master Plan by Michael Healy, based on the book by Josh O'Kane, who I also now work with, which is crazy. But I love that play, and if I could watch it like twice a week, I probably would, but I can't. So,
It is. I mean, I will say that, like, when I was in high school, the one of the first things that I saw that was Shakespeare, and the thing that made me love Shakespeare in high school, was Stratford production that was on the CBC. Like
mhm.
that, it's so valuable to be able to get that out there, and to have those, to share those with people who maybe couldn't get to the theater, in so that they can fall in love with those shows as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I'm of a generation of slime tutorials or Broadway bootlegs, as they're more professionally called. So I spent so much time in high school and early university just watching these terribly recorded bootlegs of the shows that I had desperately wished I could see. And ethical, not necessarily, but like God, I don't want to be pro bootleg. I think they're not great for copyright, but they're kind of handy for archival, I have to say.
I mean, in some ways they are. I mean, again, as in my time as an usher, it was my job to find the people who were filming those slime tutorials and try to, like, stop them from doing so.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's like, I do think that the alternative should be a better quality production that maybe people could buy tickets to and see digitally, and, like, because I still think about that professionally filmed uh 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 version of Hamilton that was available on Disney Plus, and the fact that, like, it was so well filmed that it, I mean, at the time it reminded me why I was sad that I wasn't seeing it in a theater, but, like,
Mm.
it's still effective. I prefer those to movie adaptations of a play. I want to hear the audience react to the song, not like I don't want to see a movie adaptation. I want to see a live filmed version.
Yeah, I mean, I that was exactly my thought when this is lore. When I first moved to Toronto, that was TIFF 2021. And that's when so Dear Evan Hansen the movie opened TIFF that year. Full disclosure, I have a Dear Evan Hansen tattoo. I am less attached to that show now than I used to be, but I was very attached to it when it came out and after. So I was so excited to see the movie and get to re-experience it. I'd seen it on Broadway and I'd loved it. And I remember my heart just kind of breaking where it's like, oh no, the thing that made it good was that it was theater. This is now quite bad because it's not theater anymore, and the story was never written to be told in this way. And there are things about maybe the casting and artistic choices that work fine on a stage that work less fine on a huge screen. So I just remember sitting in that theater at TIFF just so excited to even be there and just kind of feeling my heart break in real time. Where it's like, oh, I just wish you had spent this money on a pro shot. That would have been better for all involved.
Yeah, I had the same many, many years ago. Again, showing my age. I remember when the movie version of Rent came out, and how disappointed I was, and everybody that I knew who was in theater, at the fact that that show started wrong. It was like, again, this is a play that was meant to be on a stage, and all of the things that made it awesome were sort of taken away. There are pro shots of it that you can still see now, and I prefer those to the movie version. So I think I wish there were more of those, and I wish we had more of those in Canada. That people could, again, buy a digital ticket to. I think to me, that's one of the things that we missed out on from the pandemic, is the opportunity to share the work that we're doing across Canada by essentially doing a pro shot and or filming it and making it available to people as a ticket. I know that there are people who disagree, but I think we could have been watching some great theater.
Yeah, I'm hugely inclined to agree. I remember getting very tired of digital theater, quote unquote, very quickly. And it's not something I ever want to return to. But when the Come From Away pro shot came out, I watched that like the night it came out. Absolutely. And they PBS just did Next to Normal, a pro shot from the West End, and watching that with my husband was thrilling. It was amazing. That doesn't make me any less likely to go and see that show. It's just, I don't know, it's a different way of engaging with theater that I think is a really valuable part of what theater is in the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think anybody who was making theater, anybody who was watching it, enjoyed digital theater, but but those productions, those filmed productions, I think that they are, again, they're a great way to experience it. And also, I kind of think that with a lot of those, it, it doesn't not sell you an in-person ticket, because people will buy a ticket. They'll go see their favorite band play the songs from the albums that they already own. You know, um, I think and again, you can see pro shots of, I think the one from Hadestown is being done, filmed in London, and all of these. I think those are opportunities to show people what they're missing by not being in the room, and the people who can't afford to will go see it. But it's a way to share shows in a way that we haven't really done as much as we could.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly on a different scale, but I mean, I find myself thinking of the Eras Tour, Taylor Swift, right? She didn't sell any fewer tickets because they did the film version of the Eras Tour. I went to the Eras Tour twice and watched the movie, and those two things did not inform the other really. It was just a different experience and a really nice one all three times.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember that I had seen from PBS productions of Sweeney Todd, Into the Woods, and
Into the Woods, that one is
Into the Woods. It's so good, and all of these shows that I would never have been able to experience if not for PBS airing the pro shot. And I think that those actually help get those plays produced in the future as well, because people see how good they are, how an audience reacts to them, and it's a great way to keep the show in the zeitgeist.
yeah, absolutely.
Now, as somebody who, you started out, you wanted to be in theater, wanted to be in musicals. Is there a musical that you had or still or have that you would be like, this is the musical I would have done. This is the role I wanted to do.
Oh my God. Yeah, so many that I'll never ever do because of my job. But yes, I played Norma in Carrie the musical in high school, and I think I'm too old for it now, but getting to play Carrie, I did a lot of the repertoire from that when I was taking voice lessons and loved it. I got to do Songs for New World in university, so I think I can cross that one off. Same with Snoopy and You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Those had both been bucket lists for a while. Man, like my taste in musical theater tends to skew very in indie's the wrong word, but sort of contemporary and more underground. So I love the Kerrigan and Loudermilk canon. I would love for someone to do the Mad Ones. I think that's an amazing show. Obviously, I can't be in it, but I hope someone does it regardless. But like, anything in Kerrigan and Loudermilk, some of the earlier Pasek and Paul stuff, they have a song cycle called Edges that's beautiful. And yeah, before I was a theater critic, I would sort of sit and hope that someone would do it so I could be in it. Same with Dogfight, but that's okay. Things have worked out the way they were supposed to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always find everybody has that show that they want to do, even if whether they're in theater still or if they sort of like are not performing anymore. There's always that one show that's like, that's the show, that's the role.
I did. Oh my God. I went to I went to a summer camp for theater critics last year. It's maybe the best thing I've ever done. It was so much fun. But there was a karaoke night at the end. And so this program was at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Waterford, Connecticut, which is where the musical Title of Show, it had one of its workshop rounds there. And so for critic karaoke night, I sang A Way Back to Then, which is like not the 11 o'clock number, but it's like one of the bigger songs later in the show. And I was like, oh my God, this is as close to spirituality as I get. Like, oh my God, this is everything I want. So I think in that moment, I was like, maybe I do want to do Title of Show someday, but also I can't. So
I mean, maybe eventually you'll decide that you want to get back to it. Who knows, right? We don't know what the future holds.
That is true.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I'm glad that the stars aligned that allowed us to have this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.